On his birthday, Ryan Cole was late. Worried something had happened, Asher Vance searched all over the city for him, finally finding him in a suite at a luxury boutique hotel. Ryan's face was flushed from drinking. The room had been meticulously decorated, and all the people who usually called themselves Asher's friends were there. So was a plainly dressed, clean-cut boy named Leo Finn. Leo was the son of an old friend of the Cole family patriarch. He'd been accepted to a university in the city and had come alone, far from home. His parents, worried about him being bullied, had asked the Coles to look after him. Old Mr. Cole had instructed Ryan to take good care of the boy. At the time, Ryan had complained to Asher, calling Leo a boring bookworm from some small town and a total nuisance. But now, Ryan had ditched Asher's birthday to be with Leo. Ryan looked at Asher, seemingly stunned that he would show up here. Asher opened his mouth, but every movement felt like it was in slow motion. He managed to say that Ryan hadn't been answering his phone. After a moment of silence, he forced his dry throat to work again, repeating that he thought something terrible had happened. Ryan fumbled in his pocket, pulled out his phone, and glanced at the screen. He claimed the battery was dead and offered a casual apology, asking if Asher needed him for something. Today was their birthday. Ryan squinted. He feigned surprise, saying he'd been so busy he'd lost track of the days. Asher's gaze drifted past him into the room. Several people were looking back at him, their expressions unreadable. But the atmosphere was clear enough. His arrival was an unwelcome, awkward intrusion. Ryan, seemingly oblivious, tilted his head toward the party and invited him to join. Asher declined and turned to leave. After a few steps, Ryan caught up, his tone tinged with annoyance. He demanded to know if Asher was really going to give him the cold shoulder just because he'd accidentally forgotten his party. He dismissed it, saying it wasn't even a real birthday. Technically, it wasn't. Asher and Ryan's birthdays were only 5 days apart, so they always picked the day in the middle to celebrate together. It had been their tradition since they were 7, for 14 years straight. Until this year. This year, Ryan had forgotten. Asher rubbed his eyes, denying that he was giving him the cold shoulder. He explained that in his frantic search, he had abandoned a room full of people who had gathered for him, and he had to get back to them. At this, Ryan's expression softened slightly. He asked where the party was and if it was far, suggesting Asher bring everyone over so they could all celebrate together. Asher just said it was too far. He looked down as he entered the elevator, his face a mask as he met Ryan's gaze. Ryan seemed about to say something, but someone called his name from behind. He answered immediately and turned away. The elevator doors slid shut. Asher stood inside for a long moment before pressing the open button again. The door to the suite was already closed, but the sounds of laughter and cheering still echoed down the hall. He slowly stepped out of the elevator and walked to another room at the end of the corridor. This was his birthday party. The irony was suffocating. He'd been sick with worry, searching everywhere for Ryan, who had been right here all along. He'd thought maybe it was a new kind of prank, a surprise hiding in plain sight. And it was a surprise, a huge one. He sank onto a sofa in the private room, the happy birthday banners mocking him. He couldn't be bothered to move, so he just rolled over and buried his face in a throw pillow. It felt as if his world had abandoned him. But that wasn't right. Over the years, the acquaintances and close friends he'd made were all part of Ryan's social circle. It wasn't that his world had abandoned him. It was that he had entered Ryan's world, only to be exiled from it. Tears finally came, hot and delayed. He clutched the pillow tighter. After a long while, a man's voice broke the silence. "So, can we eat the cake now?" Asher propped himself up, squinting his red-rimmed eyes around the room. He finally located the source of the voice. Julian Croft, the star of the Croft family's current generation. His blind date. That morning, his older sister, Veronica, who held the power of life and death over his finances, had made a rare appearance at home. She dragged him by the ear to her corporate office. Their father was, in his own words, a Darwinist, a firm believer in survival of the fittest. He'd had a string of wives and 13 children. Now, with one foot in the grave, he'd left his various families to tear each other apart over his inheritance. Asher and his full sister, Veronica, were from the third marriage. Their mother had been a trophy wife, beautiful but useless. Asher was the high-maintenance baby of the family, equally useless. To survive among the wolves of the Vance clan, Veronica had become a ruthless overachiever. She was currently negotiating a major deal, and to seal it, she was willing to offer up her handsome, athletic younger brother. Before he met Julian, she had given him strict orders to make a good impression, even suggesting he accidentally show off his abs if necessary. If he could successfully charm Julian Croft, her position as the primary heir to the Vance fortune would be secure. She had gripped his face, her forcefulness squishing his lips into a pout, and threatened to sell him for parts if he screwed this up. But he'd had a birthday party. Not daring to defy his sister but unwilling to stand Ryan up, he had invited Julian to the party. He'd expected Julian to refuse. It was obvious the invitation was reluctant. But to his surprise, Julian had agreed. So Asher had driven him here, the two of them in silence. He didn't know why Julian was quiet, but he himself was consumed with worry. Ryan had always disliked Julian. Bringing him without was bound to earn him an earful. And now look at the situation. He glanced at Julian's impassive face and slapped his own forehead. Julian sighed. He was genuinely hungry. Asher moved to the table, swept the balloons aside, and found a plate and fork. He cut Julian a slice of cake himself. They ate in silence, heads bowed. Julian was 3 years older. Asher didn't know him well, but his name was legendary. He was the classic overachiever whose excellence was a constant topic among teachers and parents. Ryan despised him, and so, by extension, did Asher. Asher cleared his throat and told Julian not to mention this mess to his sister. Julian asked if that was an order. Feeling guilty, Asher backed down, saying it was a request. Julian noted that it wasn't a very polite way to ask. Asher leaned back, crossing his arms, finding the man incredibly annoying. He asked what Julian wanted. Julian smiled, reminding Asher of his sister's goal. To get him to agree to the deal, Asher was supposed to at least try to turn on the charm. Asher threw up his hands, claiming he didn't know how. He jokingly offered to do a set of burpees instead. Julian clapped twice, saying he looked forward to it. Asher stared at him and scoffed, telling him to give it up. A person like Julian would never be interested in someone like him, let alone his attempts at charm. Julian smiled, not denying it. Asher knew Julian looked down on him. To an elite like Julian Croft, an athlete who got into college on a sports scholarship was no different from a talking monkey. He finished his cake in a few bites, stood up, and stretched. He was leaving. The room was booked until 10, so Julian could do as he pleased. He asked if Asher wasn't worried about blowing his sister's deal by treating him so coldly. Asher leaned a hand on the table, a mocking smile on his lips. He pointed out that Julian looked down on him, yet still let Veronica set up this meeting. He had just been left alone here for 4 hours, and Julian had waited without a single complaint. Even now, he hadn't said a harsh word. Asher made a bold deduction based on these clues. His sister must have something that no one else had. a bargaining chip so powerful that Julian would endure this charade just to stay on her good side. Julian was silent for a moment, studying him. It was the most serious look he'd ever given Asher. It was as if he was only now realizing this monkey might have a few brain cells. Asher said no more, gave him a wave, and left the room. Not wanting to run into Ryan, he glanced toward the suite and saw no one emerging before heading for the elevator to the parking garage. But as he opened his car door, he looked up and saw Ryan. Ryan made a sound of annoyance, and Asher couldn't tell how much of it was directed at him. He flicked the ash from his cigarette and told Asher to get in his car. Asher shook his head, saying he'd see him another day. Ryan made the sound again, then got out of his car and condescended to walk over. He asked if Asher was really angry. Asher said he wasn't, and he meant it. Whatever anger he'd felt had mostly dissipated after half a slice of cake. The temper tantrum and the sense of being wronged had faded, leaving only a profound exhaustion. He was too tired. He just wanted to go home and sleep. Ryan's patience ran out. He said he'd already apologized and even invited Asher to join them. It was Asher who had chosen to throw a fit, preferring to sit in an empty party room rather than come over. He asked who was to blame for that. Asher froze, looking at him in confusion. Ryan, oblivious to his emotional state, continued his tirade. He told Asher he wasn't obligated to tolerate all of his bad moods. He wasn't his mother. He'd missed one birthday party, so what? Did he need to get on his knees and beg for forgiveness? Did he owe him something from a past life? Asher waited for him to catch his breath before asking slowly if Ryan knew today was their birthday and that his party was in the same hotel, on the same floor. Of course he knew. The invitation had been sent to Ryan and his friends a week ago. Even if Ryan had forgotten, surely someone would have reminded him. His clumsy excuses were transparent. Ryan just hadn't cared. Asher pressed on, asking if Ryan knew he had gone back to an empty room. And even so, he had no intention of doing anything, not even sending a text. Ryan avoided his eyes, a flicker of guilt on his face. He mumbled that he had invited him, but Asher had refused. Asher glanced at Ryan's car. Someone was sitting in the passenger seat. He didn't have to guess to know it was Leo. Ryan suddenly shifted, blocking his view, watching him with a new wariness, as if he expected Asher to do something to hurt Leo. Even if he had been dense, Asher could now see Ryan's unusual protectiveness of Leo. He was suddenly reminded of the last winter break of high school. His family never celebrated holidays together, the four factions of the family descending into a low-budget war zone whenever they met. Ryan's parents were in the middle of a loud, bitter divorce. The two of them, miserable brothers in arms, decided to run away from home for a peaceful holiday. Their plan was to go straight to the airport, catch an international flight, and see the northern lights in Iceland. But half an hour into their escape, Asher realized he'd forgotten his passport. They squatted on the curb, staring at the icy ground. Asher had suggested they lower their standards and settle for a trip to Alaska. Ryan had sighed in agreement, so they took a bus and then a train, and hours later they were in the far north. It was colder than they'd imagined. Their down jackets were no match for the Arctic chill. In the frozen landscape, bundled up like marshmallows, they wandered aimlessly. Suddenly, Ryan had burst out laughing. Asher turned, his face, red from the wind, scrunched in confusion. Ryan had told him he walked like a penguin. Asher had scoffed, reminding him that if they didn't find a place to stay within the hour, he'd be an ice sculpture. It was peak tourist season, and every decent hotel was booked. After 2 hours of searching, they finally found a room with 2 twin beds. Neither of them had ever stayed in such a dump. The room was tiny, and the heating barely worked. Hearing that alcohol could warm you up, Ryan went to the convenience store and bought a case of beer. It was Asher's first time drinking beer. Tasted awful, but it did warm them up. They sat together, shoulder to shoulder, heads leaning against each other. Ryan turned his head slightly, his lips brushing against Asher's earlobe. Asher froze, not knowing how to respond, but not wanting to pull away. Their relationship had always been like this, a carefully maintained friendship that papered over a constant, ambiguous intimacy. Ryan would make small gestures, and Asher would tacitly allow them, even learning to reciprocate. Until Leo appeared. Leo was his complete opposite. Fair-skinned and delicate, with deep dimples when he smiled. Asher, on the other hand, was tanned from years of playing tennis, the skin under his clothes a stark white in comparison. The muscles in his arms and legs were clearly defined with the slightest movement. Standing next to Leo, Asher made him look fragile and endearing without even trying. He started hearing Leo's name from Ryan constantly, though usually not in a flattering context. Ryan always said Leo was naive, poor, and foolish, but Asher knew Ryan was all talk. His words were harsh, but he knew Leo's favorite foods, his allergies, and his best subjects in school. Now, he and Ryan were still friends, still tangled in that same ambiguity. But sometimes, Asher wanted to ask him if they were really just friends. Were those fleeting kisses, the jokes that went too far, the touches that lingered, all just part of a game between friends? Today, Ryan's actions had been a slap in the face. Yet, Asher still held on to a sliver of hope. They had been together for 14 years. How many 14 years does a person get in a lifetime? He couldn't believe it was all one-sided. He wanted to ask, even if the answer was cold mockery. He would accept it. But just as he was about to speak, Julian called his name. He had followed him down. Asher asked why he hadn't just stayed in the room. Julian smiled, saying that since Asher had brought him, the least he could do was give him a ride back. Oh right, Asher had forgotten about that. Remembering that Julian was his sister's important client, he nodded and told him to get in the car. Julian didn't hesitate, opening the passenger door and sliding in without a single glance at Ryan. Ryan was practically vibrating with rage. He grabbed Asher's wrist, pulling him aside. His voice was thick with accusation. He asked if Asher was doing this on purpose, inviting Julian to his party knowing they were enemies, without even telling him. Asher let out a low laugh, using Ryan's own words against him. He retorted that since it wasn't a real day, what did it matter who came? Besides, Ryan hadn't shown up either. Ryan sneered. He accused Asher of using Julian to spite him just because he was jealous of Leo. He asked when Asher had become so childish. The warmth drained from Asher's face. He looked at Ryan seriously. He didn't hate Leo. Ryan was taken aback, clearly not expecting that. Asher repeated himself, afraid he hadn't been clear. He didn't hate Leo. In the 2 years Leo had been here, they had barely spoken. Why would he hate a stranger? He told Ryan to stop acting this way. Stop what way? Asher chose his words carefully. Guarding him, he asked when he had ever been on guard. Ryan had just done it, Asher insisted. He was afraid Asher would bully Leo, so he always tried to keep them apart. But Ryan, he said, didn't need to do that. No matter how pathetic he was, he had a decent education and had gotten into college on his own merit. He had manners. He wasn't a bully. He let out a self-deprecating laugh. Honestly, he never thought he'd have to say these things to Ryan. He'd always believed Ryan understood him, that these words were unnecessary. What hurt the most wasn't that Ryan always sided with Leo, but that he thought so little of him. After all these years together, He truly believed Asher was an arrogant, immoral person. Asher knew Ryan could be flippant, mistaking cattiness for humor, but he wasn't a bad person at heart. He was the one who, despite grumbling, would help Asher fight back when he was bullied. He was the one who would take him out for a wild time when he was down. So Asher wanted to believe that this, too, was just another careless remark. He looked at Ryan, waiting for him to say something, anything, even just an apology. But he waited for a long time, and all he got was Ryan's averted gaze. He scratched his head, not ready to give up. He asked Ryan if he knew his sister was trying to set him up on dates. Ryan grew irritated, gesturing towards Julian in the car. So that was his blind date? He commented that his sister didn't have great taste. But the Croft family was powerful. If Veronica could secure a partnership with them, she could kick not only his half-siblings but their father himself off the board. So she just sold him out like that? Ryan was indignant. He called his sister ruthless. Seeing Ryan's reaction, Asher's mood lifted a little. He glanced at Julian, making sure he couldn't hear, then told Ryan with a sly smile that his plan was to pretend to cooperate until the contract was signed, and then run away. Ryan brightened up at the idea of screwing over Julian. A 2-for-1 deal. He asked where Asher planned to hide. Iceland, Asher blurted out. To see the northern lights. He asked if Ryan would come with him. Of course, Ryan agreed instantly. Asher, filled with excitement, instructed him to bring a lot of money, as he probably wouldn't have much. Ryan told him not to worry. They made a pact. Asher told him to let him know when the time came, and he would bring his life savings. They would run away together. He just knew it. He'd known Ryan for 14 years. He understood him. When he was in trouble, Ryan would always be by his side. But then, as he watched Ryan lean down and personally buckle Leo's seatbelt, the small flicker of confidence he had just regained was instantly shaken.